Welcome, Mbali Jama, and today I'd like to discuss lessons from my own womb healing, which I happened to do quite recently at the last full moon, in fact. It was incredibly significant, so much so that I believe I will come to define my life in chapters, and it was both the end of a chapter and the start of a new one. And I'd like to do this video now while it's still fresh because I believe there's a lot of interesting and powerful lessons that have come from it, which I'll be sharing as I go through this note. Starting off with the healing power of naming. I've recently been doing a lot of work on Nomo, Ubuntu, the manifestations of Ubuntu, and Nomo is an African concept of the magic of giving something a name. And even more than the womb healing, I'm coming to appreciate the power of naming as well as its healing power, because I've always believed that writing is what I was born for. So when I write, it leads to healing. But I've never really understood the power of naming, because you don't just name things, you name feelings, you name moments, you honor yourself when you get to name the various emotions even before you can process or walk past them. Just the act of naming in itself was incredibly powerful for me, particularly because it's related to a terminated pregnancy when I was 19, and healing that wound, getting to name that child. It came with a lot of a number of um, rituals that needed to be performed. Yet, even the act of working through the rituals was was significant, profoundly so. Um, and not only just naming, but coming to release that guilt and shame. I realized that it wasn't just the abortion that had me feeling guilty and shameful, but then the subsequent incident when I was raped about 4 years later, and how also another wound that is deeply related to the womb, particularly in my incident because it involved the same person, which is the reason behind my first book. But it was just cathartic, is the word. It was quite cathartic to reach that point of getting to identify that this is where I've been, and this is the woman who has survived. And although the way I've survived over the years has not been the healthiest, and I'm coming to terms with that now, but I'm still here. And that leads me to this new appreciation for my own strength and my own power and my own guardian angels, which have carried me through what has been what I could call a dark 12 years, where I didn't even know for most of it that I was sinking deeper into some very unhealthy habits. Yet, when I got to that place of releasing, because the way that I came to name for myself the the emotional space I was in. It's that the night I was raped, I never left that room. I remember walking out, driving home, driving out, going to the police station, my brothers meeting me there, going to the hospital, arriving at home very late. My dad was in the kitchen. Then I went to the bathroom, took a bath. Then, before I slept, I wrote in my journal. All of that will forever be entrenched in my memory. But at a deeper level, I never left that room. And over the years, as I've been existing, coming to terms with fixing the surface whilst still remaining in that room, I find that it's quite an incredible breakthrough that I've reached since the womb healing exercise, because I was finally able to release, first of all name, but then release myself from that prison, which I can say I've existed in for so long. And the best part of that was this new renewed energy. It really did feel like I was walking out into the sunlight and I could feel it on my face, and I was back to the world of the living. I could breathe fresh air again. I could feel myself. It was just something I can't name, but it still continues to remain with me. But that wasn't all. Earlier this week, I just woke up one day just feeling sad, and I thought, oh, she's back. Sad me. Always gonna feel like a terrible person, me. But then an interesting thing happened whilst I was meditating in the morning. What I like to do is go out to the back of the house at sunrise, just sit there and meditate and enjoy the sun. And whilst there, I could acknowledge and locate the pain, that this is the feeling I'm feeling right now. Breathe my way through it, process it. And I realized that having gone through the womb healing, I've now got a vocabulary for myself. And I've got permission to name the pain and not have it define me. So that morning of sadness was actually a gift, because it made me realize that just because I'm out, it doesn't now mean that everything is going to be great for the rest of forever and ever. But with the challenges that come after this, I am better equipped and empowered to be able to handle a situation that I face. And then it was just maybe because sunrise, because there's strands of grass behind the home garden. But they, in that beautiful shimmer of sunrise, I should have actually taken a photo. It looked like silver strands, all the brownish uh, grass in front of me just started looking like a thousand silver strands, and I thought of the term a thousand silver linings. And it was so liberating, because it felt like, having left that room, having honored the pain that I went through, I can actually now walk through life seeing all the places I've been in the last 12 years, because it hasn't been a completely miserable existence. There's been a lot of good things. And I can just now view them as a thousand silver linings. And with each day, there's another silver lining that I identify. And I'm like, hey, there was also this, there was also that. Because it feels like the whole process of womb healing was quite foundational, in a sense that it was fixing the foundation so that whatever is built on it is not shaky. And it's a combination of factors. I won't say the womb healing alone has been responsible. It's been a very um, powerful year for me in my life, my 33rd year. Since the year for me started in May, it's just been very, very incredibly spiritually charged. I would call it spiritually charged, in a sense, where I felt the presence of the guides who walk with me, the life in front of me, my own inner experiences, my inner world and outer world have just expanded in a huge way. And more than anything, I think it's been a time of great surrender and even surrendering to this process. But I think the womb healing helped with the surrender of its own, surrendering the past to the past, no longer wishing to fix it or change it. And then just as I'm now starting to realize those glimmers of a thousand silver linings, it's very empowering. So this evening, I was looking for the covers of my books, and I don't know why. These are the 8 books I've written. Technically, I've written 6, but book number 6 is actually the 2 combined. So I actually had a cover for Courage and Character, but when I launched it was To Whom Much Is Given, and halfway through Courage and Character starts, so it's 2 books in one. And then Mavericks Unleashed, I just did the cover, which I love. But I haven't written the book. I've just got content of it, which I've actually uploaded to YouTube already. Lessons from Mavericks Unleashed. But the biggest aha for me came with these. Um, how over time, the first book was written 2 years after I was raped in 2009, and it's the whole story of the abortion and the relationship and the breakup and what happened at the end with the rape, because by then we were technically friends, but what happened that night was without my permission. And yeah, but it still felt like it was still tied to you murdered my child, and now I want to kill you, I guess. And with me believing I deserved it, that's why I said I stayed in that room. Now, when I look at these books, it feels like it wasn't me alone writing them. And as I was going through the womb healing, one of the exercises that I was allowing myself to go through, which I can definitely say was not easy, but to have conversations with the child I didn't have when I was 19, because he or she would be 15 now, 14, but you know, of an age where we could have a woman to woman conversation. And it felt like some of the books were the two of us wrestling with something, but the most powerful thing about that first book was a promise I made to myself that one day I would let my mom know. And as things would happen, beginning of this month, my grand passed away and we were attending the funeral. So before I left, I put the first book on a USB and I shared it with my mother. And at some point, she read the book, and that's when, now, a few weeks ago, she discovered that, oh, by the way, when I was 19, I terminated a pregnancy and I never told her. And it's also just added to the challenges we've had over the years. I think a close relative of womb healing is mother wound healing, because that's a huge topic on its own. But it feels like now, after all these books, once I was able to honor the promise I made to myself and to my child, with book 1, I finally actually told her. And the title of the first book is Would You Still Love Me If You Knew? Because I always thought my mother would never forgive me for that. Whatever else I can do in life, but getting pregnant is what I would never have been forgiven for, let alone terminating. But the dark places that I went with the various books have come to reveal to me that I just never stopped punishing myself. My second book was Not Every Girl is Looking for Love, and looking back now, I can see that rebellion, that I'm badass, who needs boys anyway? And that's kind of what the book was about. And sex. It was about sex as well. And then we made lemonade. This one is interesting. I was thinking about this as I was reflecting tonight. That we made lemonade actually has a picture of me drinking and smoking, but it's kind of a theme of how I got into that deep dark hole of drinking to the point of, I can say it, becoming an alcoholic over the years. So this was 2010, 2011, and it's continued. I only stopped drinking last year. And by then, I had a whole lot to regret based on the choices I'd been making and how, over the years, and it had been said that I was self medicating, not wanting to deal with things, but knowing that, hey, um, badass. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, you know? Even that sense of being invincible was quite unrealistic and, I would say, disastrous in the end. Um, oh, uh, yeah. Book number 4 was Hurt People, Hurt People. This is the one book that I couldn't finish. I started it off with, sorry, spoiler alert, um, a scene where the main character is watching someone die and she's just so unmoved by his death. She's like, yeah, you gotta go, you gotta go. And then she leaves the hospital as he's dying and she's like thinking of what to have for dinner. A good bottle of wine, and I don't remember what the meal was, but it's just that sentiment of being unshaken. And with this book, I realized that my writing gift is not my own. This was 2012. I was doing NaNoWriMo, which is National November Writing Month, where people try and write a book in a month. And I love, this is one of my favorite books to read, although I hardly ever read my own books because it was just beautifully written. I just finished a writing course, so most of the lessons that were still quite clear, and I was exploring with the different ways of writing with your five senses, describing scenes. And so it was powerfully written, and yet I couldn't finish it. So I start the book with that scene. So now everything needs to explain, and as I'm explaining, I'm tying the knots deeper and deeper, and I can't get to the point where I reconcile the first scene, the fact that hurt people, and that's where she ends up. Because, as most writers would say, you fall in love with your characters. Oh, book 2, 3, and 4 are fiction, by the way. So after the first book, I just decided to start writing fiction because I enjoyed it. Um, but yeah, I fell in love with that character, and I couldn't bring myself to not get to her redemption of sorts. Redemption being a big theme for me in my own world, in my own life. But yeah, I left Hurt People at 45,000 plus words, 290 pages. I really just had to reach a point where I was like, I'm not winning. And I stopped. It was very liberating to be able to do that because I know I can write. There's evidence of these books, but this one wrote itself into a corner and I just left it. Then there was Dangerous Blacks. This is the first book that drove me nuts, if I can be that candid. Because here I moved away from fiction and I wanted to start writing, researched work. I was in the middle where I just completed my studies at Mbali, so studying Africa, politics, the way the world works, our role as young leaders. So yeah, it was a book of the time. And I remember sharing it with the publisher, and she said it was around the time of Oscar Pistorius's trial, and she said the country is too depressed right now already. Such books are not going to be very welcomed because it was very provocative, is the word I like to use. Quite provocative. And it asked very deep questions, but the reason why I started off with this is the book that drove me nuts. It actually brought me face to face with the concept of evil. And I've always believed, silver linings, world is a beautiful place. But when you research some of the horrific elements of apartheid and the treatment that Africans have gone through in the times of colonialism and apartheid, it was heartbreaking because I didn't know that the world had that depth of what I would call evil. And I couldn't reconcile myself because I always thought, you know what, I've done bad things, but I'm a good person deep down. But when you reach that book, it just brought me to a part of surrendering, giving up on all of us as humanity. And yes, but something changed in that. So when that publisher rejected it, she was very courteous. I remember she took me out for tea and we spoke. And she said, she just made a suggestion of just writing from an inspiring place, a place of, positivity, making something better out of a world that we all know has got a lot of darkness. So I took up the challenge, and that's where courage and character came in, where I asked the question, what does it take to lead in the 21st century? And I distilled it to 5 elements, which are AEIOU, um, audacity, excellence, intuition, and integrity. I remember I could never quite decide between intuition and integrity. O is overwhelming selflessness, and U is Ubuntu. So that was in courage and character. And I interviewed a couple of CEOs, so that was a very interesting, nice project. Uh, but then I didn't have enough content because it took me, I think, about 2 years to work on this, and I lost some of the material. And then the book itself was like about less than 100 pages, and I thought, okay, I can't publish this. So then I went back to the drawing board. That's where To Whom Much Is Given came in. I think at this time I was on the leadership of BMF, Young Professionals. So here it was, us, we're young, black, we're leaders, we're at the forefront of the next generation. So what does it take to lead, and how do you reflect on this country? So it was fun as well to work on To Whom Much Is Given because we were asking questions about what's the role of black people, because we always bastardize white and glorify black, but having been in corporate SA, you realize some of the people who are harshest on, or who are enemies of progress, as it would be said, are black executives. So when you're already there, if you've been given a taste of a better life, what's your role? Do you just now start playing golf and speaking out of, the tip of your nose, darling? Or do you come back and you give back? Because I personally believe you come back and give back and you stand up for the black voice. If there's 9 white voices in a boardroom and you're the only black voice, you're the only voice we've got as black people. We tend to believe so. It was, yeah, it was a very direct challenge to black people who are already making it or have made it somewhat, for us to play our part and not become house niggas. Very well received. It was actually the first book that, oh, yeah, I published the first one, but on Amazon, I didn't really promote it. I tried to get publishers, but in those days it was a lot harder. And I'd done the classic thing of writing a story about my life and thinking it's the most fascinating thing, which is what most people do with their first books. So there weren't many takers. And then the To Whom Much Is Given, that one got huge, well, huge in my world, book launch. Yeah, people bought copies. I've still got some here. So to whom much is given, it it seems at the end of Dangerous Blacks into Courage and Character, the tone of my writing changed, and it was from that time where the publisher took me for tea and we spoke, and I started to realize that rather than use my writing to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the darkest corners, I can also start pulling myself out. And that was very empowering because this is where now I could share tools, tricks, and tips of how to work through depression, deal with failing relationships, traumas, parental wounds, and the like. Oh, I didn't mention that Dangerous Blacks. I dedicated that book to my dad, and that's him on the cover. Shout out, Dad. Because yeah, he's one of the smartest black men I've ever met, and yeah, so it makes me smile to think of writing about my dad. Actually, my brother and I were talking about it recently. That he is one person that it would be just an amazing story to write if you were to write about him because he is so unpredictable. The green lover of nature and animals, funny as ever, deep storyteller. He's a fascinating character, but he's also got a lot of depth, which I guess I got it from my daddy. And then lastly, Mavericks Unleashed. This is the book that is writing itself as my life right now because it came at the end of my relationship with corporate because God help me, I don't see myself ever going back. And how I just surrendered to my madness, I would call it. I've often said that my memoirs one day are going to be called Married to My Madness because of all the ups and downs. I've come to love and appreciate my coping mechanisms, even as eccentric as they might have seemed or as extreme. Having overcome the drinking, I could say that there is a whole lot of good that still remains with being a creative spirit, um, that just says never say die. So I'd love to teach that and for people to start embracing it more. So Mavericks Unleashed, I always think of it being handed out in institutions, mental institutions, and for someone who's in there to just have a different point of view on them being in there and start seeing some of the gifts within what they call madness or being different from the rest of society's norms. Because I think this day and age needs a lot more of those people. And so many people are in there because they're trying to fit into things that aren't truly them. So when you look in the mirror and you say, hey, you maverick, you with your flaws and differences, you're still kind of badass. I think it reinforces something in your spirit. So I'm excited by it, although I haven't done any writing yet. I just did the cover and was inspired by it. And then started doing the chapters or topics on a similar document to this. And that's what I've already uploaded on YouTube. I think I've done up to part 5, which is technically already a book. I think that material could definitely be transcribed into a full book. So yeah, one thing I noted is I I designed all my covers. The interesting thing is the perspectives of me. There's never one that I'm looking straight ahead, like the picture of my dad. The black and white, and how book one, my head is uh, down in shame, and then Mavericks Unleashed, the last book, my head is up and my dreads are back. It's been a fascinating journey. And another interesting thought that I had as I was reflecting, watching, just looking at these covers, is how over the years, while I may not have left that room until Mavericks Unleashed, the versions of me held it down. So 2010 me was like, girl, we're still in here. It's tough. We haven't forgiven ourselves, but let don't let that stop us from pushing. That was book two, and then book three. Hey, there's a sisterhood. The whole book is about sisterhood and how over the years, whatever we go through as girls, when the going gets rough, the girls would surround you and often would bring the liquor and it would be making lemonade. And even as I unpacked hurt people, and when I walked away from that book, it just felt like there was still an innocent part of me because I was like, it's like when you get to the part where you have to kill the puppy, and I was just like, I can't kill the puppy. Sorry, that makes me a sissy. I'm a sissy who doesn't kill puppies. So leaving hurt people unfinished was also a powerful statement. So that was 2012 me, shout out to her, and then 2013 me going into Dangerous Blacks. Although it went into some deep dark holes, I learned to do quite an extensive amount of interrogation and research and incorporate creativity with the logical side of my brain, which I think has really benefited me well over the years. And then courage and character, it was just like as leaders going forward, let's be the best we can be. In this day and age, 21st century, we need people of courage but character as well. We're tired of corruption and all the shenanigans on the continent. We need to be a new breed of leaders. And that's what To Whom Much is Given was saying, that let's not always say, oh, white people must do this. No, let's start in our own lane and let's start celebrating our progress. That's the other thing with So Much is Given, where it was just let's celebrate Black progress as is, because I think there's a chapter called Siyabangena, and it's true God Siyabangena. And now we get to Mavericks Unleashed. It just feels like taking it to its own level, and how you take making lemonade, uh, being through the dark places, being a person of character, and just now it's an era of becoming, stepping into my own self, outside of the wounds, outside of the shame and the definitions that corporate life brought with them. It's the mark of a new era, and I'm excited, and even more excited by this process, because I don't even know what this video is gonna be for. It may not necessarily be for the masterclass, but just honoring the journey and honoring Mbali Jama, Lindi Nkosazana, Katerik Nobuslami. That's me.